We are going to study from a test lesson with Rabash. First, we'll read from HaSulam, the study of the 10 Sefirot, from item 47. We'll enter the lesson with Rabash.
We need to begin with item 47. Begin with item 47. The second phase is simple. What is the second phase? It doesn't say. Since now it returned to being expanding in Keter. At that time, it is not expanding in Chokhmah, Binah, and Chesed, and expanding in Gvura, not expanding in Tiferet, and expanding in Netzach, not expanding in Hod, and expanding in Yesod, and not expanding in Malchut, and then it repeats there's in the beginning. Once more, he explains the second phase. We learned the second phase. The first phase we learned he calls Ab of Ak. And the second phase he calls Sag of Ak. So he begins to speak here of Sag of Ak, which is the second phase of what? Of the first expansion. What is the first expansion? Parzuf Galgalta, whose light departed. There was one phase that failed it, called Ab. But the second phase, a filling of a filling, which filled whom? Parzuf Galgalta. Since Parzuf Galgalta was filled by two Parzufim, plural of Parzuf, Ab and Sag, we are now speaking of Parzuf Sag. What is its order? Since now it returned to being expanding in Keter. When we learn expanding in Keter, it follows exactly the same order that we learned in Parzuf Ab. That is, at that time, it is not expanding in Chokhmah. So, Keter Chokhmah, it does not mean that the light of Keter and the light of Chokhmah. Here, he speaks expanding in Keter, expanding in Chokhmah. For each and every degree, we discern two lights, the light of Chokhmah and the light of Chasadim. So he says, when expanding in Keter, then there is no light of Chokhmah in the entire degree. Only what shines there? The posterior of Keter. And posterior means Chasadim. Here is the meaning. Here. It turns out that according to the same order that Chokhmah, Bina, and Chesed, which need Chokhmah, do not have it. What is there instead? Chasadim. So expanding in Gvura, and Gvura is called phase of Vak, of the Rosh of Zer Anpin, and not expanding in Tiferet, which is Gar, of the Toch of Zer Anpin, not Chokhmah, and necessarily expanding in Netzach, which is Vak of Toch of Zer Anpin, and not expanding in Hod, which is Gar, that needs Chokhmah at the Sof of Zer Anpin, and expanding in Yesod, the same thing, meaning Chasadim, and not expanding in Malchut, and Malchut we also learned needs Chokhmah, and then it repeats as in the beginning. What does it mean, repeats as in the beginning? That once again, not expanding in Keter, and once again expanding in Chokhmah, and then all the degrees that need Chokhmah now receive Chokhmah. It turns out that expanding in Chokhmah and in Binah and in Chesed, and not expanding in Gvura, and Kvora rises to the Gar of the Rosh, which is called Chesed. And the residue of Kvora, which now remains as the anterior phase of Chesed, shines to Tiferet. Then Tiferet, which has Chokhmah, which is Gar of Toch, then Vak of Toch, which is called Netzach, joins Tiferet. And then the residue of Netzach from the anterior phase of Tiferet gives to Hod. So there is already Hod, there's Chokhmah in Gar of the Sof, and then Yesod, which is Vak of the Sof, joins Gar of the Sof, which is Hod, and its residue needs to give to Malchut. It gives to Malchut. That is to say, who rises? We learned in Ab that the light of Malchut rose. There it was like this. And also the Vav, which was sweetening the Malchut, the Vav of the Hay, also rose. And the residue, which is the Dalet in the Hay, he gives to Malchut. This is what we learned. Item 48. Now, there are several phases. The first is that there is always a craving of the lower light to adhere to the upper one. Therefore, when there is expanding in Yesod, it is not expanding in Malchut. Why? Because then we learned as in Ab, it is implied from here the light of Malchut. When there is expanding in Yesod, it is not expanding in Malchut. When was this? We learned simply because then the light of Malchut ascends there in Yesod because of the craving. It is similar in all the other Sefirot, except for Chesed with the Binah. Since when there is no expanding in, not expanding in Binah, there is not expanding in Chesed. Why? When there is expanding in Yesod, it is not expanding in Malchut. Why? Because then the light of Malchut ascends there in Yesod. Why? Because of the craving. It is similar in all the other Sefirot, that the light that departs rises above. Not expanding in Malchut, then the light of Malchut rises to Yesod, except for Chesed with the Binah. Since when there is not expanding in Binah, there is not expanding in Chesed. What should it have been? It's like this. If not expanding in Chesed, then Chesed rises to Binah. Here he says the opposite, since when there is not expanding in Binah, then Binah should rise to where? To Chokhmah. And its residue should have given Chesed. It was not like this. Why? Due to the two distances. Rather, how is the order? When it is expanding in Binah, it is also expanding in Chesed. Why? As light of Chesed is not equal to the entire light of Binah. What is he saying? He is saying, when it is expanding in Binah, it is also expanding in Chesed. As light of Chesed is not equal to the entire light of Binah. However, that one moment when Binah descends to her place, she finds Chesed in her place, and instantly Chesed descends to his place. And this is the meaning of the Vak, being a degree in and of themselves, and they cannot adhere to Binah, who is from Gar. What's written here?
Friends, we're going to listen together to a conversation titled No One Can Do It Alone. It took place about a month and a half